Network Dojo.
Hey, Jeff Rensink here from Network Dojo, and in this video we're going to go through the new CCIE Enterprise Wireless v1.0 certification in detail. So all about the new CCIE Wireless certification that we're moving to. So on February 24, if you haven't heard, 2020, the CCIE Wireless certification ends and is replaced or kind of rebranded with the CCIE Enterprise Wireless exam, and they're moving that back into a new version with a new name, 1.0. And so February 23rd, the old one goes away. February 24, the new one goes into effect. So in this video, we're going to talk about the change in the program. We're going to give an overview of the new requirements that's going to take to get this CCIE Enterprise Wireless certification, kind of talk about the transition, and then we'll dig into the blueprints and the hardware and software list. So first, program update. Again, February 23rd, 2020 is the last day to do anything related to the CCIE Wireless version 3.1, whether it be with the written or the lab exams. At this point, the old Cisco certification program as a whole goes away, and we're in a completely new era for Cisco certifications, including CCIE Wireless. February 24, every single cert, for the most part, from NA all the way through IE, is changing. So at this time, wireless gets rebranded Enterprise Wireless at the CCIE level. This kind of goes into some track consolidation they're doing down at the NP level. They're kind of moving route switch, wireless, and design into something just called Enterprise. And so at the IE level, they are doing sort of two specializations with Enterprise. There's Enterprise Infrastructure, which is the route switch side, and then for us, Enterprise Wireless. For the most part, though, this is what we would have kind of assumed in the traditional wireless program, what version 4.0 would have been. So again, we're today, at the time of this recording, still have about 8 months before the new program goes live. We are at CCIE Wireless version 3.1. We were kind of waiting for a 4.0 update anyways. This is basically it, but on top of that, it's just getting rebranded. All right, so what are the requirements underneath the new program to get that CCIE Enterprise Wireless? Well, we still have to pass a written exam followed by a lab exam, so that part is similar. One difference at the written level is that there is no longer an actual CCIE written exam anymore. What they've kind of replaced that with is something called a technology core exam. So this kind of falls into the CCNP world as well. So if you look at the CCNP tracks, every CCNP track has a corresponding technology core exam. And so we're in the enterprise track, so there is an enterprise core exam. Data center has a data center core exam. Collab has a collab core exam, and so forth. And so the core exam is kind of a broad type of an exam covering the large information for that focus or that track kind of as a whole. And then at the NP level, there's specialization exams that go deep dives into a subset kind of the topics. So this exam is now actually sort of a dual purpose exam. It's an exam that would allow you to achieve a CCNP. It's one of two exams you would have to pass to get a CCNP. But it's also the exam that unlocks the capability of taking the associated lab, CCIE lab, in that track. And so for us, in the CCIE Enterprise Wireless world, we would have to pass the Enterprise core exam. We're in the Enterprise track in the wireless world. Funnily enough, though, that Enterprise core exam could also allow you to take the Infrastructure CCIE, or the route switch, what the route switch is turning into. And so it's the only track actually where one core exam actually feeds into two IEs. Every other track, there's just one core for one IE. So this core exam is a 100-point, from all reports at Cisco Live, 2-hour exam that really is CCNP level. And okay, if you are in the Cisco certification program, you're probably yelling at me right now. They were pretty emphatic when people would bring up, oh, it's a CCNP level exam. No, it's not a CCNP level exam. It is something different. It's a core, a technology core exam. Okay, well, call it what you want, but it's one of two exams you need to pass a CCNP. So by definition, it's a CCNP level exam. Otherwise, it's something different. If it's an exam you need to pass to get a CCNP, it's a CCNP level exam. It just so happens to also apply to the CCIE as well. So yes, it's a CCNP level exam. So just a little quick details about our enterprise core. So our core, again, enterprise core. It's a ENCOR 300-401. Again, first date to test, February 24, 2020, 2 hours, 120 minutes. And you can take this at any normal Cisco, Pearson VUE testing facility. So just like any other written exam that you've ever taken. Okay, so passing the enterprise core exam unlocks the ability to pass the lab exam. And so we have our enterprise wireless lab exam that we're talking about in this video here. So, actually, sorry, I said same basic rules that we've had for CCIE written exams up to this point apply. Actually, that's not correct. I forgot to update that one sentence. It's true in the fact that the written exam is valid for 3 years. So in today's CCIE, you can pass CCIE written exam to allow you to take the CCIE lab exam, and that CCIE written exam can be valid for up to 3 years to allow you to take the lab exam. But in the current program, we had these limitations of, okay, well, if you pass your written exam today, you have to take your first lab attempt within 18 months. Otherwise, your written exam would prematurely expire out. We wouldn't get to the 3-year mark. And then once you take that first lab exam, you can't space subsequent lab attempts out more than 12 months. Or again, your written exam expires prematurely. That is gone now. So once you pass the written exam, which again in the new program would be the enterprise core exam, it's valid for 3 years always. So there's no need to take your first lab attempt in any time period other than the fact it just has to be within 3 years. Otherwise, after 3 years, your exam would expire out and you would have to retake the core, or repass, I should say, the enterprise core exam to be able to continue to attempt the CCIE lab exam. So, kind of good news there. So it just sort of makes it less more. You have to take the written exam less often than some people. Every once in a while someone would run into that 18-month time frame or something like that, and they'd be like, oh, great, I gotta go pass that written exam again so I can go take that lab exam. That's gone. So cool change on that part. All right, so the lab exam itself continues to be an 8-hour exam. It also has 2 modules, which today we have 2 modules, the diagnostic and the config sections, but the modules are a little bit different now in the new version of the lab. So module 1 is called the design module. This is a 3-hour module, no more, no less. And this is kind of reminiscent, if you ever were familiar of the CCDE, the design practical lab exam, it kind of sounds like that. And so it's a section where you don't have direct access to any gear. You're going to be kind of designing, and for us it would be a wireless lab in this case here. And so it's all going to be, they're going to give you details, customer requirements, diagrams, and different things like that. And they're going to start making you answer a bunch of questions to help you sort of design out this network here. And so you're answering multiple choice questions or drag drop questions, or there's a lot of different sort of flavors of these questions that they might ask you, choose this or that or whatever it's going to be. But it's all just sort of computer-based questions that you're going to be answering. And that's, again, 3 hours design module. Once that module's done, you're going to move into module 2, which is more closely to what we're used to with a config-based module, but they call it the design, operate, optimize. So that sort of cycle of design, deploy, operate, optimize. So that circle of design, deploy, operate, optimize, that's really what they're kind of going for as they design out these modules. So by and large, it means config-based stuff. We have access to all of our hardware. We're configuring things, we're troubleshooting things inside here, effectively making things work, and that's 5 hours, so still 8 hours total. And the idea is that there's supposed to be sort of an overarching story that connects module 1 to module 2. So it's not like you design random network 1 over here and then configure random network 2 over there. You design a network that you then work on deploying and operating and optimizing. So they're supposed to sort of link together into one sort of cohesive story. So very much like today, each module is going to have a minimum passing score. And so you have to meet the minimum score for each individual module in order to pass the lab. And you also have to achieve a minimum combined score for the module. So at the end of the day, there's three scores you need to meet. The module 1 minimum score, the module 2 minimum score, and the combined score. If you can meet the minimums of each one of those things, you pass the lab. If you miss the minimum of either one of those three things, you ultimately fail the lab. So same deal as what we're used to today. So here's just sort of a little picture from a Cisco Live presentation, kind of showing the two modules together. In the module 1, you can't go back. So once you answer question 1 and move forward, you can't go back and fix question 1 if you realize something was wrong later. So you're always moving forward, just like a regular written exam is kind of like that. Module 2, again, it's pretty much what we're used to from a config section. They do mention these web-based items in module 2. I don't know if we'll see that or not, but I guess time will tell. If we see some multiple choice questions in module 2 or not. Maybe, but we'll see. And this is just a little bit more of an explanation about what the two modules are. So when we talk about that design module, number 1 measures the candidate's ability to create, analyze, validate, and optimize network designs, which is the base for all deployment activities. You need to understand capabilities of different technologies, solution services, translate customer requirements into solutions, and assess network readiness to support proposed solutions. Module 2, and you can kind of see this sort of blue line moving from one progressive storyline over to the next one. They're supposed to be connected. The what on this one, module 2, candidates will build the network according to the design specs and requirements and restrictions, and will operate optimized given network technologies and solutions. All right, validity period. So in the new program, once you pass the lab, the CCIE is valid for 3 years. Technically, that's true today as well. It's just today we sort of split those 3 years up into a 2-year active phase followed by a 1-year suspended phase or state. We removed the suspended state in the new program, so it's going to be 3 years of active state, and there is no suspended state now. So 3 years, you're good, and you don't lose any benefits after 2 years or anything like that, but you still have 3 years to recertify. If you do not recertify within those 3 years, you lose your CCIE. Again, no more suspended, so 3 years active and then gone if you don't recertify within that time. Last bullet. When you recertify, your new expiration date is 3 years from the date of recertification. And so if I pass my lab January 1, 2022, I need to recertify by January 1, 2025, 3 years later. Let's say 1 year later, January 1, 2023, 1 year later, I recertify. I was like on it, or I got another CCIE or something like that. So it doesn't add 3 years, leaving me 5 more years to recertify. No, it's 3 years from the date that I recertified. So if I recertified January 1, 2023, even though I had 2 more years to go, now my new date is January 1, 2026. So I got another 3 years to recertify. I can't ever get it longer than 3 years. Now when we recertify, you can recertify through either exams or continuing education credits, or actually a combination of the two. So we still have continuing education credits. Now because it is more of a 3-year cycle where it was kind of a 2-year cycle before, it moves from continuing education credits and needing 100 of those to 120. And actually, the interesting thing is here we can actually mix and match CE credits and exams. So at the end of the day, we're trying to get to 120 points. And I actually have another video that talks about recertification, so you can look at that for a little bit more detailed examples of this. But the quick information here is that to get that 120 points, we can do all CE credits. We can do exams to recertify us. And the interesting thing here is exams have points that they are granted. So if I pass another CCIE lab, let's say I get my data center, passing a CCIE lab, boom, 120 points, recertifies everything automatically. If I start taking some written exams, like the enterprise core exam or any core exam is worth 80 points. It doesn't have to be in the same track, it can be any track. That's not enough by itself, right? I still got 40 points to do. I can take a specialist exam or a concentration exam at the CCNP level is a specialist exam. Those are worth 40 points. So I could pass a core exam plus a specialist exam, get my 120 points, and recertify things. And again, I can earn continuing education credits, 1 credit, 1 point inside there. So I can mix and match these. So I could say, you know what, I'll pass a core exam and I'll get 40 continuing education credits, boom, 120 points. I recertified my CCIE. So all exams, all continuing education credits, or mixing, you can do any of them. So very flexible in terms of that. A couple other notes about the continuing education credits. There is no more limit on Cisco Live credits, so you can completely recertify based off of attending Cisco Live. If you could actually get 40 credits a year, awesome, more power to you. You can do that. There is no more fee to leverage continuing education credits here, so that part is free. You gotta pay money to attend the things, but you don't actually pay money to cash those credits in anymore. And like I said, if you want more information about this, check out my other video I have on YouTube that talks about recertifications in the new program. Okay, transitioning into this new program. So a lot of us are interested in maybe doing some work today, might have already started on things today. What about us? Do we get anything as we potentially transition into the new program? Now, I do have another video that will talk in greater detail about the transition process, recommendations that I have to help you figure out, okay, if you're thinking about the version 3.1 today, or you've already been working on it, should you keep on working on that? Should you start thinking about the new version? I go into greater detail over there, so check that one out. But some high-level things here. If you get your CCIE Wireless before the transition date, you already have it, or you're going to get it between now and February 23rd, 2020. You get to keep that CCIE Wireless certification until it expires, but you won't be able to renew it. So eventually it will just expire itself out. But for free, you get the CCIE Enterprise Wireless certification that you will be able to recertify. So moving into the future, you will be a CCIE Enterprise Wireless certified individual. You will be able to renew that certification, and that certification will inherit the expiration date that your CCIE Wireless had going into the change. If you happened to be in a suspended state at the time of the change, so you passed that 2-year mark in the current program, you went from active to suspended, but you haven't lost it yet. When we flip into the new program, there is no more suspended state, and so it will move into an active state, and at least you'll be active, but you still have to recertify with the same final expiration date that your previous certification already had. What if you were sort of partway? So some people will have passed, say, their written exam, but they didn't pass their lab exam. What about them? Well, the cool thing here is that if you've passed your CCIE Wireless written exam within the last 3 years, so it's still a valid exam towards taking a lab, you will get for free credit towards having passed the Enterprise Core exam. So actually you get two things here. Number one, you actually get an Enterprise Core certification, sort of like it's kind of like a specialist badge sort of a deal, a recognition that you have these skills sort of a deal. But the important part here is that you get credit for having taken the exam, and that's actually a separate thing. And I'm going to have another video specifically about this process, as well as all the different ways you can get credit for an Enterprise Core exam, which will allow you to take the lab without having to repass the Enterprise Core exam in the new program. So, but for us, let's just worry about the written exam. If you pass the written exam, as long as it's not expired, it will give you credit for having passed the Enterprise Core exam, which will grant you the ability to schedule and take the lab exam. So you won't have to take the Enterprise Core exam right away. You'll be able to schedule that Enterprise lab exam. Now, your core exam will inherit the expiration date that your CCIE written exam had moving into this new program change. And so if your CCIE written exam was valid through the end of, say, 2023, your Enterprise Core exam will be valid through the end of 2023 towards taking that CCIE lab exam. Now, we mentioned where, in today, we have these requirements that if I pass my written exam today, I have to take my first lab attempt within 18 months. Let's say that you pass that 18 months, but when the new program change happens, those limitations are gone. And so it's 3 years from the time you passed your written exam, you can take the lab exam. So that translates over. So it's actually a win-win across the board with that. Now, if you haven't passed the wireless written exam, you don't get anything. You get to your knowledge that you've gained, but that's all you get. You will have to pass the Enterprise Core exam unless you've done some other activity that translates into getting credit for taking the Enterprise Core exam. And again, check out that other video that I'll put out there on YouTube to go through all the scenarios to feed into that possibility. Okay, let's talk about that Enterprise Core exam itself. So again, we have the core exam to pass, we have the written exam to pass, we're going to look at the blueprint of each one, and we're also going to look at the lab hardware software list. So let's focus on the Enterprise Core exam because that's sort of our written exam moving into the future here. So the important thing to remember as we're looking at this today prior to the program change is that you get the choice. If you haven't passed your CCIE Wireless written exam yet, you can decide, hey, you know what, before the change happens, I'm going to pass that and not have to take the Enterprise Core exam so that I can take the lab. Or you might look at this and say, you know what, actually I like that exam better. I'm going to not worry about the CCIE Wireless written exam, but come February 24th, I'll worry about taking the Enterprise Core exam, and I'll use that to grant me the ability to take the CCIE Wireless Enterprise Wireless Lab exam. They both have their pros and cons. Today's wireless written exam is definitely wireless centric if you take out the evolving technologies section, but it's definitely a lot more deep. It's an expert level exam, whereas the Enterprise Core exam is predominantly not wireless. There's some, but it's a small percentage of the overall exam, but it's more of a base NP level exam, so it's not super technical compared to something like the CCIE written exam is today. So less technical, but a lot of stuff that's not wireless, whereas wireless written, all wireless, but much more technical. I suppose I should look at this. What did I just do? That was smooth. Let's try this again. Okay, so Enterprise Core exam. Let's take a look at this. We have a total of 6 sections within here. We're going to see some wireless stuff, and then we're going to see a lot of stuff that is not. And so in the architecture world, we're talking about some design principles, definitely some wired design principles on here. We got a little bit of a wireless design principles on top of that. On-premise and cloud infrastructure deployments, SD-WAN, SD-access, which some of that is wireless, some of that is not, QoS type things, and hardware software switching type stuff. On the virtualization side of things, most of this really isn't germane to wireless, but we're talking about sort of hypervisor, virtual machine type things, virtual switching, VRFs and GRE tunneling. That's usually a little bit more on the WAN side of things, although you can use tunnels for other purposes too. And then we have Lisp, VXLAN. These are some of the SD-access type stuff that we're going to get to, although these are used in other places as well, so semi-related to things that we need to understand. Infrastructure, so a lot of switching type stuff, layer 2, layer 3 switching. We have some wireless specific stuff, so cool, some of our stuff here. Some services that lots of different things might be leveraging. Network assurance, and so diagnosing different things. Some services like NetFlow, spans, IP service level agreements, DNA center, some scripting, netconf, restconf type stuff. What else? Security. So authentications on things, ACLs, control plane policing, REST APIs, a little bit more wireless here, so some security on our wireless LANs on top of that. Some overall network security design. And then automation in here, so again, some scripting, some DNA center type stuff on here. So, as you can see, a little bit of wireless in there, but a lot of stuff that's not wireless. But if you look at the descriptors, oftentimes you're seeing things like describe, interpret, construct. These are levels of questioning that don't require you to be able to know how to write out configurations for things. That would be more like a configure or troubleshoot word. And so when you look at these and you look at the descriptor words, you can see, okay, I need more base level knowledge for this, or this one actually you need to know the configuration and show commands for that. So it kind of lets you know maybe how deep they go into some of these different technologies called out in the blueprint. And then also pay attention to the percentages and see, okay, well, there's a bunch of stuff in here, but it's only 10% of the overall exam, and so it's not as heavily weighted inside there. So that would be the blueprint for the Enterprise Core exam, give you a little bit of an idea of what you might need to deal with depending on your timetables. All right, let's move over into the lab exam. Oh, goodness. Burp. Perfect. Let's take a look at the blueprint for the lab exam. That was good. Where you see topics that are not configurable, so we're going to look at this blueprint. Remember that this blueprint is only for the lab. If you look at a blueprint today in the CCIE world, it's what they call a, what do you even call it? It's like a unified blueprint that is valid for both the written exam and for the lab exam. So as you're reading these things, it's like, okay, well, that doesn't make sense in the lab, so that must just be a written topic. We don't have that anymore, right? It's the lab blueprint, but we have two modules. One of the modules is a design module. And so again, when you see things in there that don't really look like they could be configurable in a lab, that probably means that, okay, well, this is something I might need to know for the design module inside there. So you can't just completely ignore it because, again, you might need to understand this to answer some of those design module questions. Another thing to note is that the blueprint doesn't differentiate between what do you need to know how to do on AirOS versus Mobility Express versus these Catalyst controllers in the Fabric world. And so the rule of thumb should be, if that technology is valid on any one of these platforms, you're going to need to know how to configure it on any one of those platforms. All right, with that in mind, let us take a look at that. Here would be the lab blueprint inside here. So again, 6 different sections. Section number 1 has some more kind of design type stuff in here. So understanding standards and protocols, design, survey type stuff, absolutely things that we can't really be configuring about. Understanding sort of coverage-based deployments versus throughput versus location versus high density. Again, this is more design type stuff in here, but now we're getting into things that could be either in the design or in the configuration section. So getting into your RRM type stuff, channel use, that's more design. RF profiles, data rates, RxSOP, clean air, airtime fairness. So the other thing that you'll note, if you're familiar with the CCIE Wireless version 3.1 today, a lot of the stuff is just sort of rearranged. And so they've taken things that would have normally just sort of been in kind of the AirOS section, the big section that has all of your kind of wireless controller type configurations, and they'll like take this section and put it over here. And then in that section, they'll put it down here. And so what you'll notice is that it's a lot of the same stuff, but just sort of rearranged through different places. All right, the wired side of things. This really is almost identical to the same wired stuff that we need to know for the current lab exam. So we have our layer 2 type stuff, VLANs, SDP, ether channels. This is new, so the fabric type stuff for SD access, so VXLANs and Lisp, and VRFs, all that fabric overlay kind of stuff. PoE, basic IPv4, IPv6, basic multicast, QoS on the wired world, and our services. So with the exception of this, it's all the same stuff that we're looking at today. So nothing really changes there. Okay, Enterprise Wireless networks. Again, they're not differentiating between AirOS, Mobility Express, and the Fabric world. And so again, if it's applicable in any of them, you need to know how to do it in any of them. So we have our controller interfaces and ports. Our lightweight APs, modes, logging, CLI, joins, discoveries, high availability. So a few of these are more applicable in the Catalyst world as opposed to our AirOS world. Wireless segmentation, RF groups, profiles, AP groups, FlexConnect, some tagging, again, some of the new stuff inside there. FlexConnect, Office Extend, Mesh, the same types of non-local mode stuff. We see it in this version that we saw in the last version. Workgroup bridges kind of got thrown in here. There's really no autonomous section anymore, but there's a little remnant of autonomous inside of here. Mobility, again, some classic stuff, some stuff in the new world as well. All right, so a lot of the stuff inside here is what used to be sort of the ICE section in the last blueprint, but again, they're sort of just reorganizing things inside here. So a lot of ICE stuff, but some non-ICE stuff as well. So management access across different things. Some of this is actually login type stuff, CPU, ACLs, management via wired or wireless, all that type of stuff. We have our ICE identity management, identity pre-shared key, new feature inside there. We have our, again, this is kind of copied over from before, so client authentication type stuff, some override type things, guest management, so local web auth, central web auth, sponsor policies. We have kind of our wired switch port authentication type things. Again, we had that before, but it's just kind of called out here now. TrustX for SD access in the wireless world, so the group tags, ACLs, intrusion detection. So again, this is more on the controller side of things, but just got put in this section now. Switch port tracing, that'd be more of a prime kind of a thing. Wireless business applications, this is kind of the last section from the previous blueprint here. So all of our QoS type stuff, voice, AVC NetFlow, roaming technologies, wireless multicast, and the MDNS services within here. So again, nothing really new, slightly reorganized. And then we have kind of our management platform plus CMX platform stuff falls underneath here. So we still have prime infrastructure in this version of the lab. All the same prime stuff from before is still within here. We have the CMX server still in the lab, is adding on that DNA spaces, but this is all, for the most part, CMX kind of related type stuff. And then we have the new DNA center inside here to support our fabric world and the stuff they want us to do there with the automation, assurance, and SD access. So that's the blueprint for the new exam. And so if you're used to version 3.1, it's like, wow, it's all there. Then we add on SD access with DNA center. So that's the basic deal. So not, if you are someone who has been preparing for 3.1, all your work, almost every last thing directly translates over into the new version. We're just doing it under some new code, plus some new stuff to add on to the end. And then finally, let's look at the hardware and software list. What gear are we actually dealing with, and what code levels are we dealing with in the new lab? One more tab here. Okay, so hardware first. From a switching perspective, we still have those 3650s, what we had from version 3.1, but we're throwing in the Catalyst 9300s, Catalyst 9200s, which is going to give us support for that fabric world. We still have the CMX server. We now have DNA Center on top of things. Still have ICE, still have Prime. Access points, we still have some of the 3700 series APs that we had in the previous version. New, we have 3800 series APs. The 1850 series APs are still there. Those are going to be used for Mobility Express. And then from a controller standpoint, we have a lot of possibilities. Will every one of these show up in every single lab? Maybe not. But from a physical controller standpoint, we pretty much have the 3504 controllers and Mobility Express, if you want to consider that a physical controller. Virtual controllers, we have the 9800 embedded into the Catalyst 9300 switch. We also have the Cloud 9800 as well, so the virtualized 9800 running in ESXi. And then we also have the virtualized AirOS controller as a possibility on top of that. And so probably pretty likely any physical controller will show up in the lab. Virtual controllers, maybe it shows up, maybe it doesn't. Just depends on the lab that they're going to write for that time. Code levels, we have on our Catalyst 9200s, 9300s, and the 9800 controllers as well. It's all 16.1 Gibraltar code. 3650s are running ever 16.6. CMX server moves from 10.3 in the old version to the new version 10.6. DNA Center is running at 1.3. ICE upgrading from 2.2 to 2.4 in the new lab. Prime from 3.2 to 3.6 in the new lab. Autonomous, if we have autonomous APs, still running 15.3 code, which is what we see in the version 3.1 of the existing lab. Controllers, again, if it's the new Fabric stuff, it's 16.11. If it's AirOS, it's 8.8. Our Windows 7 PC has now been upgraded to a Windows 10 PC for our wireless client, also the PC that we're going to be using for a lot of our GUI configurations. That PC will be running just an updated version of the AnyConnect Secure Mobility Client 4.7 and an updated version of the Jabber Client 12.5. And we will still have a Windows server, but all these things here, there is no configuration. They're there, we'll leverage them, but we're not going to configure these on top of here. So that is what we're dealing with. So if you have the ability to get any of these or corollaries to any of these, the important things would be, try to have something that runs some 8.8 AROS based code. If you can get some Fabric stuff, cool. If not, hey, that's where rack rentals come into play, right? Mobility Express, really of any flavor, is going to be just fine, again, as long as you can run 8.8 type code. And then if you can get a server, awesome. Slap these VMs in there if you can. But if not, again, that's what rack rentals are for, right? So that is the overview of all the exams that apply to the CCIE world and the hardware software list. So if you want more information, definitely check out the Cisco Learning Community. It's got all these details. It's got these web pages that I was just showing you here. Again, I know you can't click on a link on a video, but you can just Google CCIE Enterprise Wireless. It'll be way up at the top of the list. You'll get there pretty quickly. If you're looking for any sort of training materials, our website, networkdojo.com, we will absolutely be creating materials for the new CCIE Enterprise Wireless, as well as lower level stuff to come, but that's going to be our primary focus over the next time here, getting that stuff updated for everyone. And you can also email me, if you have interest in the certification. I'm happy to be a resource to you, so shoot me an email, jeff@networkdojo.com. I'll do my best to help you out as well. So with that, we'll say thank you. Check us out if you haven't already checked us out, and we'll see you in the next video.